Alright, well this video is going to be on how to test to see if your Onan starter is faulty or not. Because you want to make sure it's bad before you go pulling this thing apart. So because we got it out of the RV, I'm going to show you what you need to test and a couple of ways you go about doing it. See, like right now, we go to start, nothing's happening. You hear the fuel pump come on, but the starter's not cranking over. Now what's supposed to happen is when you push this button, this little wire receives 12 volts. At that same time, we also need to have a good 12 volts here. So what you'd probably have to do, if you have like those little endoscopes that you can hook up to your phone, you could fish that endoscope up through here, because remember that normally that big cover's on here and you're very limited on space. So one way, you know, if you got little skinny arms like this, you can come in like here and do some feeling, testing, looking. Another way is coming up from the bottom. You have this area here is notched out, so that might be easier. I might, once we get this put together in RV tomorrow, I might try that and add it to this video. But the two things we need to confirm. So first thing you want to confirm is make sure you got a good solid 12 volts going to the starter. Alright, so that lights up, we've got a good 12 volts. Now if you don't have 12 volts, then you want to make sure you absolutely got a good ground. Because if you lose ground, this ground strap here fails. Or if the engine's mounted in rubber, or the whole thing's mounted in rubber and there's a bad ground strap, if you don't have ground, that's going to be the same thing. You're not going to have a starter that's going to work. But more importantly, we want to make sure is when we hit the start button, push the start button now. So when he pushes the start button, it lights up. You hear the fuel pump. He's going to do it again. It has a little bit of a delay. Push and hold. There it goes. It's like a 2-second delay. All right, so that way, if we see that, if you see power on this wire, then you know the solenoid's receiving power. And if you're receiving a good solid 12 volts here, then that starter should engage and start. If it doesn't, then you know you got a bad starter. You got to pull the crazy generator out of the RV. Of course, there's another trick, a little sketchy. Let's see here, screwdriver. If you get in here and cross, you'll get that. That's another way to engage it. Because only at least that way you know the starter turns. See, you'll notice the starter turns, but it's not engaging, because it's the solenoid's job to push the gear down into the flywheel. So you could, if you get this action and you are receiving 12 volts and it still won't work, then you just got a bad solenoid. But doesn't, either way, you still gonna have to take the crazy thing, drop the generator to get it out, because there's just not enough room any other way to get this big starter out. So we'll also see about testing options once it's back in the RV, try to come up through this hole and see if we can access these wires. But I thought seeing this was a part. If you think you got a bad Onan generator starter, this would be a good tip for you to understand what's going on and what to look for, because you're kind of blind and in the dark. Once all this cover is back on here, you just can't see hardly any of that stuff. Okay, still thinking about how to test this starter or confirm it's bad. Possibilities. Another way, I think, because I'm going to do this again when we're out in the RV, but I wanted to show you before we get this cover on here. So if you come up from underneath, from the muffler, I'm thinking you can get up in here maybe, just like this. See what I'm doing, how it's got that cut out for you. You can reach in here and get this wire off, pull it to the side, get a test light on it or a voltometer, and when you push the start button, remember we should see 12 volts on this. If we got 12 volts on this wire and 12 volts on this, it should work. If it doesn't, then you know the starter is at fault. So that is something we'll try again tomorrow once we get it installed in the RV. There we go. Interesting. I want to address something else. I think I may have mentioned there's always the slim possibility you may think you got a bad starter. Maybe you hit the start button and all you get is maybe a click, but the engine doesn't rotate, doesn't turn. There's always a slim possibility the engine is actually locked up, seized up. You may have a big hole in the back where you threw a rod. So the engine is actually locked up tight as a drum. So what's happening is the starter has tried to start and it's wedged itself into the starter bit. The Bendix has wedged itself into the flywheel. so it can't rotate. So every time you push the button, it just maybe just clicks. So I'm trying to figure out how you could confirm that. One way you could do it is by taking your extension and ratchet 5/8 socket. You could come up through the bottom, and there's a cap on the very bottom side, opposite side of this. Well, actually the cap's right here. This plastic plug, you take that out, put your socket up in there, and you can manually rotate the engine over. Because you'll be able to, the armature should probably still rotate, and you can pull a valve cover off, I guess, to make sure the rocker arms are moving when you do this. But then you know the engine is still free. That's probably pretty rare, but just something to keep in mind. You know, either way, the thing's going to have to be dropped on that. But that way you could probably confirm your diagnosis and know what to go do from there. Something else I need to point out is pretty important here is I came across this other video, and I hate to call someone out, but I have to let you know about this. I was watching another fella's video, and I thought it was a great idea. I watched this video, and he pointed out, he made a comment. He said that if you want to check your starter, you unplug this wire and you apply 12 volts to it, and it should make the starter crank over. I thought, wow, that's a great idea. I'll remember that. But when I got into tearing ours apart, I looked at that very same wire, and that was some very bad information, because this wire does not go to your starter solenoid. This wire goes directly to your ignition coil, and your ignition coil is mounted up underneath this plate to this coil here, but the wire's up here, but the coil is mounted on the bottom next to the flywheel. And if you mistakenly watch this video and apply 12 volts to that wire, you're going to instantly fry your ignition coil, and then you're going to have to pull the generator to replace that. Now, we can all make mistakes. I'm sure I've made mistakes, but that could cost you a lot of time and expense if you try that trick. Something else I want to point out is I watched another video. I only found one of the video where a guy was showing the teardown of these things, and I noticed something in his video. He pointed out something. He said this white wire went to the starter, and he mentioned that you unplug this wire, apply 12 volts to it, and it will activate the starter. Well, that's not the case, because I followed this wire. This wire goes to your ignition coil, and if you apply 12 volts to this wire, you're going to fry that coil, because all this wire does, it comes off the coil, is that's just your kill wire. So these are the same coils on any lawnmowers that you'll find, little magnetos. So what these for is when you want to stop the spark, when you want to stop the engine, you just ground this wire out. So if the engine was running and you unplugged it, touch it to ground, it'll kill the spark, and the engine will die. That's why you'll see these wires tie into the white wires tie into the oil pressure switch. So if that oil pressure switch has 0 psi, it will go to ground. So it grounds the wire out, and the engine, it'll stop the engine from running, keep you from blowing up the engine due to low oil pressure. Okay, back to the starter troubleshooting. You see we have it back installed in the RV, and of course here's the exhaust, and you go up through here, you can see and get access to the solenoid. But there's a solenoid, you see the small white wire, there's a small terminal, right, you see the terminal right there? So you can unplug that terminal, check for 12 volts, and then also confirm you got 12 volts on that large nut. If both those have 12 volts and the starter's not turning, you know you got a bad starter or a possibility of a locked up engine. So you do have access from down here from the muffler area. You can do that test. And of course, you're not going to be able to pull the starter, but you can confirm it's bad. Of course, you want to pull the starter, you're going to have to drop the generator just like we did. Fun.